Chidimma Adetshina has withdrawn from the Miss SA competition just days away from the big night. The top 9 finalist issued a statement about her withdrawal on Instagram. This is following the emergence of evidence suggesting her mother may have committed fraud and identity theft. Chidimma's participation has sparked controversy on social media due to her nationality. The Miss SA pageant said they had vetted the participant prior to her joining. But what does this latest development mean for both brands, that being brand Chidimma and also brand South Africa, right? So let's have that discussion now. For that, we're joined by Brand Africa founder, Mr. Thebe Ikalafeng, who weighs in. Good morning to you and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Nalini. Have a wonderful, happy Women's Day.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. You know, this has been such a divisive conversation, and I think that with the revelation from the Department of Home Affairs around the suspicion that her mother may have caused identity fraud, then the discussion in South Africa just heightened a little bit. And I thought, let's bring you in because you were with Newzroom Afrika just a few days ago weighing in. And if you allow me, I want you to listen back to what you had to say. Let's play that clip.
Where we are actually in this point with the Chidimma issue, it's definitely Afrophobia. I absolutely agree with that. But I think it's actually raising a very important issue in South Africa now, which is what does it actually mean to be South African? Because I think the biggest challenge that South Africa has had in the 30 years since we found our freedom is actually articulating what it means to be South African. Because if you look at the comments in the social media, so it is perhaps a mix of citizenship, which is Afrophobia in one part. And then on the other part, it's actually an issue about identity. Because people are saying we cannot have somebody who doesn't speak our language, doesn't embrace our culture, doesn't tell our story, represent us.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, Mr. Ikalafeng. And the thing is, the point that you made was made by so many, right? That's as well. Certainly the issue of Chidimma has made us question what it actually means, what it represents to be a South African. What do you feel about these revelations from Home Affairs around the suspicions around her mother? And with that coming out, do you still hold the views that you did in that particular interview?
Oh, I think what the citizenship matter that has been settled with Home Affairs, or at least the prima facie evidence that it may be fraudulent, it settles one thing. It settles the legal part of it. So my first part of my argument has always been up to that point that based on available information and based on what was represented, that if she claimed to be a legal citizen of South Africa, then she must be accorded the rights of a South African. But we have now established that those rights were probably benefits of a crime, if you will, and that's why accordingly I'm saying that if it's been established that her citizenship was fraudulent, which means was a crime, she cannot be a beneficiary of a crime. So that settles that part. Then if you go through all the social media posts and all those, people were talking about we kind of Nigerians, we kind of foreigners, we kind of do all those. Now that still holds, that is still Afrophobia issues, if you will, Afrobic issue, if you will, that we still have that challenge in South Africa where we still need to try and clarify and to just build on our relationship with the rest of the continent, or understand really our relationship with the continent, because only when it comes to people like you and I, Africans, do we get so excited, do we get rid of them. But when it comes to other people who don't look like us, who probably own much more than just a spaza shop, who perhaps own 75% of the land or so, we don't get so excited about it, but we get excited about somebody who owns a spaza shop that makes 1 or 2 loaves of bread a day. That's that part. The third and important part which I raised there, which still remains and is a big project of South Africa, is this imperfect democracy of South Africa, which is a work in progress. still requires to be articulated. Because if you ask anybody in the street, what does it mean to be South African? I'm not sure they'll be able to tell you that in an articulate way, as well as a British person will, an American person, or a Nigerian person will, or a Ghanaian person will. South Africa is a work in progress.
Yeah, and so really interesting. So you are holding your ground, and I think that's a really interesting point that you make, to have a nuanced conversation around criminal activity versus the issue of identity, which are two separate issues. Let's look at other things, though, that have come up. Certainly in this week, as we've looked at this matter around Chidimma and Miss South Africa, Gayton McKenzie, the Sports, Arts and Culture Minister, obviously has been very, very vocal about the matter. But one of the things that he highlighted this week as well on his social media platforms is the issue of the ownership of Miss South Africa, and that now being a very interesting discussion around, well, it is privately owned. It is not a state machine, right? And what that says about brand South Africa, should Miss South Africa be privately owned? And in that way, how do you then keep a close eye on this person that is selected by a private entity to go and represent the country on a global scale?
In the absence of a government doing anything, the citizens will always create something. Private sector will always create something. That has always been the driver of nations. I think government, for me, government should be in the business of policies and oversight, and the private sector should be in the business of implementation, if you will, or creating. But they need strong oversight. I think where I agree with the minister is that a Miss South Africa, or anything that has got the name South Africa, takes with it that it must embody the loose values that we know, the values of Ubuntu, of diversity, of tolerance, which is South Africa, and freedom, which is sort of an academic way of looking at South Africa. So that anything that carries the name SA or South Africa must carry those values. And should the Ministry of Arts, Culture and Tourism own it? I'm not sure, because I think government has got so much more to do on their hands. The most important thing they need to do is to put food, is to ensure there's roads, there's hospitals, there's schools that are functioning, and all those. And Miss South Africa, which is a cultural expression of South Africa, which is right in there, that is embodiment of the culture. That I'm not sure it should be run by government. If it's run by government, to me, the running of government should be more in the oversight and setting up the policy and the guidelines of, if you're going to put anything with the name South Africa, it must embody A, B, C, or D. And I think we have not been able to do that. We have not been able to do that because in the 30 years of South Africa, we haven't yet arrived at the point where we can all agree on what South Africa stands for. We all agree that South Africa is a fragile country, that South Africa has come from a difficult position, that we need to reduce, to create jobs, to reduce inequality in society. This is perhaps the most important job that is now remaining of South Africa, to define who we are.
You know, someone made the point that certainly tomorrow, when the pageant does take place, it is going to be one of the more watched ones in previous years because of all of this controversy. And I don't think I can disagree with that. I am, however, concerned about the fact that those eyes aren't just coming from South Africans or Africans, who I imagine others on the continent may have quite a bit to say around the activities over the last few weeks. But the global community. I mean, at some point you had people touching and covering and talking about this matter of Miss South Africa and Chidimma in the US and various other parts of the world. What's the story that we've told to the world about ourselves in this moment?
To me, I think what it just said this is a nation that is still in progress. But it also says this is a nation that has yet to recover from the difficult times of 375 or so years of suppression and oppression, and has not yet recovered from it. Remember, we come from colonialism to apartheid to all this. So in a way, we have not been able to settle on who we are as a people. So where people are now, they're feeling a bit fragile, because now they feel that while we're trying to define ourselves, to create a little 4 acres and a mule for ourselves, somebody else is coming to take a little bit of that. I think a leading person in the party called me once recently and said to me, Thebe, our biggest shortcoming as a country is we've not been able to define who we are, where we come from as a people, the years that we spent in exile, the generosity of the rest of the continent. Not that we should be overly generous, overly thankful, but in a way we should be overly understanding that we are an open country, we're a free country, we're a welcoming country, and we will have these. But the problem with this South Africa is lawlessness, corruption, and inability to implement the laws. Had we done all those three, the way that when I travel to anywhere in the continent, and I'll just focus on the continent. When I travel anywhere in the continent, I am required to be compliant with the laws. I am required to produce documentation. I can't just pitch up in any country. So I think where South Africa has come short is its inability to be able to implement and to ensure that we are all compliant with the regulations of what it means to be South Africa. We would not be in this situation if that was the case.
Yeah, I imagine that as the preparations take place now for Miss South Africa, the organizers, the finalists are, watching in awe as this debate continues to play out. And maybe you can talk to us about what you think this is done for brand Miss South Africa, right? But what they take from it, considering that now more than ever, they realize the importance of, just the very title, Miss South Africa, the representation of brand South Africa in that very initiative, right? So what lessons they should be taking from it, and perhaps a message for them as they get ready to, bring us that pageant tomorrow, the day after Women's Day.
Miss Africa's got an interesting history, because up to 92 or so, I can't remember, when Jackie Mufwege became the first quote-unquote black person to win Miss South Africa. At that stage, it was the embodiment of the Afrikaner, or the white culture and the white identity of South Africa. And then we started having the Jackie, the Bassi, and all those. And what that meant is the young girls in townships everywhere began to dream and to look to see, hey, there's somebody who looks like me, somebody who represents me, somebody I can aspire to. And that's what Miss South Africa came to represent. That's somebody I can send out to the rest of the world and say, speak for me. When Zozi was talking about occupying space, he says, this is somebody I can send to occupy my space in the rest of the world, if you will, and I will be fine with having that. So what this means for brand South Africa is brand Miss South Africa, rather. What it means for Miss South Africa is that brand Miss South Africa needs to be aware to the fact that the title is the embodiment of three important things: that the head, the heart, and the hands of the person who carries this crown carries the hopes and the ambitions and the identity of South Africans. The broader discussions around this issue have been around identity. The fact that perhaps the argument we started and we also entered the argument was more on the legality of a citizenship, that's another matter. So there's being born South African, which is a requirement of the Miss South Africa. But that is just the first checkpoint. The second most important checkpoint is when you put in these young women in front of a television or send them out to the rest of the world. Are they flying the flag of South Africa? Miss South Africa should be the flag carrier of South African women. And I think what this means for them is they need to add in an extra layer, more than just the fact that you cannot enter, even if you be married or if you have children, you cannot enter. If you're South African, you can enter, it doesn't matter what color you are. They now need to add a new layer that do you, through your heart, your hands, and your head, do you embody the values of what it means to be South African? Somebody who's Ubuntu, somebody who's welcoming, somebody who's tolerant, and somebody who represents the diversity of South Africa. If they can put that extra layer, we will never have these problems, because guess what? People will self-select. Chidimma was able to enter because the requirement was South African ID, South African citizen, you're good to go. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at the sentiment of the people, and which is correct, is it's a lot more than just the identity, the citizenship, but it's also about the identity of the person that do that. And you know what? People did so well, because South Africans are incredible in one thing, that they will go to the lengths of the earth to investigate this in the absence of anybody else doing their job. They went and analyzed the social media. They went and analyzed where she says she come from, who she's associated with. That's part of the due diligence of selecting somebody who is an ambassador of South Africa. The same way that if you want to become a political ambassador, we should be checking your background, because you are going to into the world and represent who we are.
Yeah, so more checks and balances certainly necessary. But one thing, I don't think anyone can deny this, is that this matter around Chidimma certainly has sparked really interesting and introspective conversations for South Africans around our identity as a country and in what we, the story that we tell to the world. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Thebe Ikalafeng, founder of Brand Africa, continually speaking on this Miss SA Chidimma issue. Of course, a lot of questions around what happens to Chidimma now, and is there a victim in this matter, perhaps the woman whose identity may have been stolen in this alleged debacle. We will, of course, keep looking at the matter.